Happy Monday and welcome to Casting the Net, Reeling in Holistic Health, where we care about your mental health and well-being. I'm your host, Coach Rice, and I want to make sure that you tune in every Monday at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time, where I have my special guest on to talk about real issues that matter most. I want you to check us out on YouTube, Facebook Live, on Business Facebook page, also on the Be Awesome Network. Stay tuned. I think you're going to really like this next guest. Happy Monday and welcome to Casting the Net, where we care about your mental health and well-being. I am your host, Coach Rice. And with me today, I have Savio P. Clemente. He is a keynote and TEDx speaker, journalist, board-certified wellness coach, best-selling author, and healthcare leadership strategist. He works with leadership teams after disruption, when the crisis is over, but performance has not fully recovered. Okay. He more of a performance coach as well, right? And so, Savio, tell us where you're from and how did you embark upon this particular journey?
Yeah. Well, Coach Rice, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the intro. I am from New York. I actually was not born in this country. I came from Bombay, India. I came to the States when I was 3 years
Mm.
old, and I grew up in a little town called Peekskill. If you were a fan, I'm going old school now. If you were a fan of the show The Facts of Life back in the day,
Oh, you are,
it
yeah,
took
you are old
place.
school.
It took place in a little city called Peekskill, New York. I grew up in Peekskill, New York,
Okay.
and so I don't live in that town. I live about 15 minutes away from that town, but I lived in New York City because I went to school in New York City for many, many years, and then I came back to this other town. And I would have to say, having both suburban and urban life was probably the best experience I could gather. It's been great.
Okay. So you got this passion burning in your soul. Where did it come from?
Yeah. So I knew from an early age, well, actually, when I was really, really young, I always wanted to be an astronaut. I would look at space, be fascinated with space, and then the Challenger explosion happened back in the mid 80s, if you don't remember. And basically, I was like, oh, hell no, I am not going to put my life at risk like that. And so I pivoted. I know I was really young, but I pivoted and I actually knew that I wanted to do something with computers. I was always very good at it. I would tell my parents, even back in the day when everything was so new, that I was going to do something with computers. And sure enough, I did. I went to college for computer science and information systems. I worked for dot coms back in the dot com boom, and then also was a casualty of the dot com crash. And I worked for a lot of startups, a lot of dot coms, and then my life sort of pivoted in a very dramatic way in 2014. I'm fast forwarding a lot now. I was diagnosed with stage 3 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. The way it happened was really odd. Up until that point in my life, I didn't really have any health issues or problems, but I was seeing a naturopath. Basically, a naturopath is someone who analyzes your blood and tells you what like vitamin structures to take, what diets to take. And I was seeing him for about 7 years. So I noticed that I came back from a trip with a friend, and we came back from Europe, Paris, and Amsterdam. And I noticed I was having like drenching night sweats. And I'm like, well, this is odd. I'm in
Mm.
Europe, I'm not in some tropical country. I came back, and then my stomach started getting distended. And I was like, let me go see him. So I saw him, and he's like, oh, based upon this blood work, something's wrong. He's like, you really need to seek mainstream medicine. He's like, go get a sonogram. I'm like, why a sonogram? And he wouldn't tell me. So I went to go get a sonogram. They wouldn't let me leave the office for about an hour and a half. They finally came out of the office and said to me, I needed to have a relative come pick me up and take me to the hospital. I'm like, what are you talking about? I drove here. They're like, please get a relative to come pick you up or a friend. So my dad came, took me to the hospital. Within an hour and a half, they admitted me to the fifth floor. And then I heard nurses whispering that I would be transferred the next day to the seventh floor, which they call the cancer floor. So I knew I had some form
Mm.
of cancer. It was only a day and a half later after I got transferred to the seventh floor that they told me it was stage 3 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which was a blood cancer. I was bedridden for a week because they had to put a nephrostomy tube in me to distend about 8 liters of fluid from my abdomen. So I had ascites, that's where my stomach was distended. And then inside the
Okay.
ascites was the lymphoma. And then about 2 days before I left, I was in the hospital for a total of 15 days. The medical director came to me. She's like, listen, we know your health history. We know you're good, but if you don't start something called R-CHOP chemotherapy, I don't know where you're going to be. I'm like, really? And she's like, yeah. And so I had to do a lot of soul searching in that moment. Usually people are told they have cancer and they have a couple of days to get their bearings and figure it out. Now people are using AI to kind of, I had none of that. This was in 2014. I had Google, but everything was just so fast. And so there wasn't really much to do. And then I fortunately did the 6 rounds. I did 1 round in the hospital and 5 other rounds of R-CHOP chemotherapy. In about 4.5 months, I got my scans and blood work, and I was told I was in remission. And I was in remission for a decade. And that was the precipitous for my path, for my major, major pivot, which was in health and wellness. Just because when you live through something like that, you can't ignore it, or at least I can't. But I also
Right.
knew that I had to wait until 5 years because they kept telling me after 5 years it's less likely to come back. And so I didn't want to build something and then have it all crumble.
Let me ask you a question. When you heard cancer, how was your mental state?
Yeah. So when I heard cancer, for me, as a person who was extremely introspective, somewhat of an introvert, although I like to jokingly say that I'm an extrovert for money. Cue Tina Turner with Dancer for Money. I'm an extrovert for money. Um, I I treated it like um, with the seriousness that it needed. But I also, and this might sound a little um, non-traditional, this answer, but I wasn't really, Coach Rice was afraid of dying per se. I was
Mm.
actually more afraid that I didn't live, that I didn't finish what I came here to do. I know none of us get a physical assignment handed to us, but
I know what you mean. Yeah.
I felt like
Your purpose wasn't over.
yeah, I felt like I let people down. I let myself down. I didn't do what I came here to do, although I had no idea what that was. And that's what the thing that scared me the most. And so obviously I was in discomfort, the hospital, things tied to me and all that. That wasn't great. But that kept running through my mind. And so it was only after talking to a friend and then realizing that I had to resource my own feelings about it and really figure out for myself, well, what's the best way forward? And I realized the best way forward for me was the middle way, which was saying yes to the treatment in the hospital. And then when I
Okay.
left, doing a whole bunch of integrated modalities. I literally threw the kitchen sink at my diagnosis and did as much research as I could back then.
Wow. So how did you how did you respond to the chemo? Were you really sick? Did was it really what was that journey like?
So I had one of the most aggressive chemos, which they deem the Red Devil. It's called the Red Devil for a reason. I didn't
Mm.
really care much about losing hair. Now I wear it as a fashion statement. I'm a two-time
Okay.
cancer survivor, so I'm okay with the hair loss. I understand females though; it's a big deal, but for me it
Yeah.
wasn't. I honestly, and it's probably because of my personality type once again. I didn't really see myself as a cancer patient. Yes, my eyebrows fell off. Yes, I physically look different. Yes, my energy kind of waned, but I didn't really experience lethargy as much. I wasn't tired all the time.
Okay.
I wasn't throwing up.
Okay.
My appetite was great. Believe it or not, I can't, believe it or not, I was working out like 4 days a week. I was doing boxing and spinning while going
Oh
through
wow.
cancer treatment. Um, And
That's amazing.
but I will say the 5, 6 hour chemo that you have to go does make you tired. I didn't get nauseous, but it does make you tired. And my relatives and my friends were like, "Do you want me to come?" And I'm like, "You staring at me like a zoo animal for 5 to 6 hours ain't gonna help me. I mean, thank you, but that's not going to do anything. That's going to make me more self-conscious. It's just not going to do much for me. I would rather just sleep it off or watch TV or just, you know,
Right.
but my dad's like, I got to help you somehow, please. And so he would pick me up and,
Okay.
pick me up and that's it. I treated it in two ways. One, I reframed the
Okay.
chemo and all that. So instead of a poison, I saw it as an elixir. in the Bible they call it mana or life force from the universe. So I changed I reframed the whole process.
Okay.
And then I also decided that I was going to resource the things that I wanted to do rather than the things that were happening to me. So in other words, instead of just seeing myself
Okay.
as the victim, I saw myself as someone who's just going through a trial. This is
So
good.
the fight became, I have to get through this so I can finish my work.
Yes.
Okay. So as as you're going through this journey, what changed for you?
Few things changed. I wasn't, it's so interesting because as I talk about this with you, we're looking at about 11 years difference. And the second journey with cancer, which I didn't really spill
Which
a
I was
lot.
gonna ask next. Yeah. So you can go into that
Yeah.
if you want.
Yeah. Let me go into it just because I
Yeah.
think it's important. So I received the remission status in 2014, literally 5 days before Christmas, best Christmas present I could ever have. And I was good. I would, get my scans once a year or get my, blood work done once a year. After 5 years, they said, Mr. Clemente, we love you. We really do, but you don't have to come see us. I'm like, can I just do it for my own mental sanity, please? And they're like, yeah, 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 yeah. Of course, of course, of course, you can come. So I, did all my certifications for, health and wellness. I'm board certified. I was a writer, so I wrote a lot of pieces. So I became a bona fide journalist. All that sort of happened. And then in 2014, I came back from another trip. Now this is sorry, 2024. I came back from another trip. So this is a decade later. I was on assignment to India. I wrote about separateness, and I visited about 8 cities. So I write for a few publications. So I came back, and I was noticing a few weeks before I left that I noticed some ear fullness and some like nasal congestion. I was like, okay. So I saw my oncologist before, and I was like, he's like, yeah, everything looks good. He's like, I'll see you in a year. I'm like, okay. I'm like, oh, by the way, doctor, I am experiencing this. I'm like, I'm gonna go see my ENT. He's in the city. He's like, okay, that's fine. He's like, just tell him to, send over the stuff. We'll put it in your file. I'll see you next year. I'm like, okay, great. And so I go see my ENT. My ENT goes to me, Savio, there's a lot of nasal congestion in your right nostril. He's like, you're a B cell lymphoma survivor, right? And I'm like, yeah, I'm like a decade now, like in remission. And he's like, do you know B cells can live in the nasal cavity? I'm like, what? I mean, Coach Rice, I thought I was going for nasal medication. Like I had no idea we were talking about cancer. And he's like, yeah. And he says this to me that echoes consistently. He's like, I've been burned as a doctor before. So he's like, let's do the safest route and let's get an MRI. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah. So I got an MRI. It looked weird to him. He's like, let's do a biopsy. And Friday at 3 p.m., I receive a my chart notification. I read it. It tells me that it's a aggressive, same lymphoma, but this time in my nasal
Oh
cavity.
no.
The other time it was in my stomach, and I remember asking, so this is a different oncologist because the other one retired. I
Okay.
remember asking him, and he's like, if it ever came back, it usually is localized. It usually comes back in the same spot. Usually, not always, but usually. So, and the next day was my 25th college reunion. People that I haven't seen in 25 years that I was emailing weeks before, months before, that I'm so excited to see them. And
Right.
I didn't have the stamina, the courage, or even the desire to fake it. So I never went. I just wrote a few
Oh
of them emails.
no.
I wrote a few of them emails and I just said something really pressing has happened in my life. And unfortunately, I can't attend. And that's it.
Oh wow. So this journey, now that so you cancer free again.
Yeah. So people don't know is that when you have a relapse, especially lymphoma, which by the
Okay.
way, which I didn't know, but it's the most studied cancer. That blood
Mm.
cancer specifically, lymphoma, is the most studied. I didn't know until I went through this process. But once you have that relapse, they call it refractory, it comes back, is it's a comprehensive healing. It's not a joke. It requires 3 day stays in the hospital to get something called RICE, RICE. Then you have to come back and you have to get a neck catheter, and you can either get a autologous, which is your own stem cells, or allogenic, someone else's stem cells. Luckily, I got my own. You have to sit by a machine for 6 to 7 hours a day. Sometimes people are there for 3 days. You can go
Mm.
home and come back. Mine was only one day. They have to collect the stem cells. Then you have to go back into the hospital, get something called beam, another form of chemotherapy. Then they give you back your stem cells. Usually people are in the hospital for about 3 weeks. I was there for 4 weeks because I ended up having tachycardia. Every time I would stand up, my pulse would go to like 160, 170. It was so bad one night that I had to be rushed to the ICU to get
Mm.
norepinephrine. I was in a quarantine room, 29 days total. I lost 26 pounds. I got out of the hospital. They did scans and blood work, and they told me I received something called a CR, which is a complete response to treatment. I don't use the word remission anymore, as you can imagine why.
Right.
And then my doctor said, listen, there's a clinical trial, and think of it as an insurance policy. It's an immunotherapy, which basically stimulates the immune cells. He's like, you don't have to do it, but you can. It'll be about 4.5 months. My sister's like, why would you do this? And I'm like, after going through all this, I'm like, because if it ever came back, I can't do that treatment again. Once
Okay.
something like that is given, you can't redo it. So I'm like, I would always be thinking in the back of my mind, I should have done that last stage. I should have said yes to the clinical trial. So I said yes to it. I did it for 4.5 months, and then I did 5 months of physical therapy because a few things, once you get a stem cell transplant, literally your bone marrow is completely depleted. And wait for this, you actually get, they count the days after your stem cell and they give you a second birth date. I thought it was some woo woo thing. And
Whoa.
like, no, this is considered a medical rebirth. You're an actual
Wow.
physically your body reconstituting. You're a different physically a different person internally now.
Mm.
So now I joke around and I say I have my actual birth date in the winter, and now I have my second birth date in the summer. And also with that comes the fact that all your vaccinations as a child is completely gone. Completely gone. I have to get revaccinated. So literally I'm on batch 5, and the first batch was 8 vaccinations. So I had no idea children get as many. Maybe I totally forgot on purpose. I had no clue.
Right.
It was insane.
It was a lot. I just didn't keep up.
So basically, that's where I'm at. This September will be 2 years since my stem cell transplant. So this
Oh,
September
wow.
I'll be 2 years old from a medical standpoint.
From a medical standpoint. So, with that being said, what type of changes did you incur with this new bird?
Yeah, a few things happened to me. So one thing is that I don't know if I can say I feel like a different person, but I can tell you that a lot has been triggered. Like the first time I had cancer, the side effects were very, very minimal, like maybe a little bit of neuropathy in my fingertips. This time I can feel it in my feet, the neuropathy. I have to be on heart medications because, they have to protect, certain aspects. So I have something there that I have to sort of, watch out for. And then also just conserving my energy levels, right? Because they
So
literally
you're
say,
you on medication.
yeah, I'm on heart medication
So
because
you're on so what changed was you're on medication and you have to conserve your energy.
I have to conserve my energy, but also to a large degree, what's changed also is that I don't feel like I have to give someone an answer for saying no. Like if I don't
Oh,
want to
you
do
learned
something,
you
I just
learned no
can't.
is your best
I
friend,
just
right?
I just cancel it. I mean, I'm nice about it, but I don't give a reason. I just say unfortunately I can't make it.
Yeah.
And the other thing that changed as well is I learned a lot of things that only this experience could give me, this lived experience. So my background is I work with healthcare leaders and leaders. I talk about pressure. I talk about high stakes situations. I talk about disruption. I talk about the fact that performance doesn't fail first, clarity does. And so you don't have
Yes.
clarity. And so I practice what I preached. I'm like, okay, I'm board certified health and wellness coach. What do I do? Because once you get medical treatment and you have a team of people, once that's gone, you're left to your own devices. That's why so many people falter because they don't know how
That's
to
true.
adapt to the rest of it. And fortunately, I've been through the first phase, first time in 2014. So I knew the enemy well, so to speak. So I knew what I was going up against. So I wasn't really concerned about my mental state or my emotional state or even my like psychological state. I was more I needed the medicines. I needed the scientific validated medications for this. And I also knew that I had to do other things of an integrative level. So, you're probably not going to laugh because you're in this industry, but I did like ecstatic dance where I was like barefoot dancing by myself. I did internal family systems work. I mean, I did so many things except for psychedelics because I didn't feel like that my mind was in trauma. I felt like my body
Right.
was in trauma. And so why open that door? Because you have to be responsible
Right.
if you open any door in life. And so that's the only thing I didn't do. But if you name a healing modality, even an ancient one, I did it.
You've done it.
I did it in those 16 months. I totally did it in those 16 months. And I
So
was
let me
I
ask you a
was
question.
about it
Let
too.
me let me let me ask you a question because you're not only a and wellness coach, you're also an executive coach.
Mhm.
Tell me, how do you incorporate the two, or do you incorporate the two, or how do you differentiate it?
Sure. So most people, few things. Most people think that leadership is in this executive corporate world. No.
No.
What is Coach Rice? What is leadership? Leadership is someone you want to emulate,
Yes.
follow, and someone that you actually want to some degree be or mirror. And so for me, whenever I'm doing executive coaching, it's the human that's always there. Yeah, it
Right.
might be some great words like how do I increase strategic reversals, how do I increase ramp and return on investment. And of course, I can
Right.
speak that language. That language is important to be spoken. But at the end of the day, it's about what am I feeling? What are the frustrations? Where's the uncertainty? How do I mitigate risk? Those are the things that
Yes.
always come up.
What are
So
the pain points?
a lot of the work I do, so I'm also an embodied coach where I use the body as a resource. So it's not just talk therapy, it's actually where do you feel that in your body? What is
Got
the
it.
sensations? What's the imagery what's the sound that might be coming up? How do we actually move that? So I call it the three brains, the head, heart, and gut. So there's a lot of work on that. But my work is really, like I said, really about this idea of how do you navigate after a crisis? Because most people
Right.
think the crisis is what you need to solve. Yes, of course, we all want to solve crises, but
Right.
it's really about what happens after the crisis when you have to recalibrate, reorientate,
Yes.
figure out a new way forward. That's the key. That's when you win or lose. And so I call it the post-crisis leadership gap. It's a gap that gets created, it starts drifting, shifting, and then a chasm creates. So how do you get back to that place? And when it comes to organizations and teams, that's like the number one question that most people are asking because in a disruptive world like ours, socially, don't even get me started
Yes.
politically, don't even get me started politically, and also technologically with
Socially,
AI.
also, God.
Yeah, with AI, everyone's asking, how do I figure it out? What's
Exactly.
what's
That's
the
true.
way?
And so when you think about the disruption, I think about that often, especially with corporations,
Yep.
because you have so many different generations in the corporation. And, when you think about that, like disruption, what do you think it teaches us about our identity?
Well, the number one thing that I deal with a lot with healthcare leaders, and I'm currently running an interview series with CEOs and CMOs, so they're in the trenches. It's this idea not only of pressure, but this idea of high stakes. Like it's about them, their team, their organization, and then another human being. Like that's not a
Right.
joke. That's a
It's no
lot.
joke. It's
And
no
it
joke.
and it's cognitive overload, cognitive pressure. It creates this um uh, idealized version of themselves. It's like a mask that they just can't put down because they
Right.
have to have the answers consistently and constantly. They're being challenged. There's, bureaucratic, red tape. There's the whole system, the way it's sort of built. And then they're going up against something that's changing all our lives, which is AI. It's like, how do we figure this out? How do we really figure out what's happening, even politically, with regulations and how that's happening, how compliance gets sorted out?
Yes.
And so it's
Lots of
really a lot.
changes.
One of the data points that I was shocked at was one doctor, a CMO that I interviewed for the series, and he mentioned that the U.S. has about up to 960 billion with the B in healthcare waste in the U.S. $960 billion
Not
in healthcare wasted.
surprised.
And what do you think that's a result of? You think that's just a result of equipment? No, that's human beings making ill decisions. That's decision
Mhm.
quality gone wrong. That is not actually figuring out for yourself, how do I move forward? And if we're talking strictly doctors, there's a reason why they often say doctors don't make great patients, because they're great at doling their expertise and their advice. And they saved my life, so they're heroes to me, but they're not really great at taking their own medicine or figuring out how to self-regulate for themselves. It's just non-existent.
That is so true. That is so true. And with all of this happening, leaders get flustered. How have surviving cancer helped you lead when you're under pressure?
Yeah. Well, for me, I don't think you could deal with higher stakes than what I dealt with, because
Right.
it's life or death. Even though, even though I say that I wasn't really afraid of dying, it doesn't really matter, right? At the end of the day, I tell people, like, if you look at my story and you look at what I've been through, you say this is really dramatic. But it could be anything in your life. It could be a
Yes.
business loss, a divorce, getting fired, losing your job. I mean, like a whole bunch of stuff that could happen to you.
Mhm.
So this, what we're all talking about is this idea of crisis and how do you handle it?
Yes.
And so for me, cancer really taught me a few things. One, I am really not attached to a lot of things, but I want to caution, I'm also not too detached with a lot of things. So
Okay.
I live in that middle space
Okay.
because I think it's very important to not feel like you don't care, because then you become apathetic, and that's not
Yes.
the right way forward. That's not the balanced way forward. At least if someone like me who's seeking balance, that's just not the right way forward.
Right.
Another thing also is perspective. So one of the things that I did in the hospital is I use psychological distancing. So a lot of people talk about psychological safety, right? What's psychological safety? It's the idea that in your team, there's trust, there's vulnerability, and you
Mhm.
create that cohesion. But psychological distancing is creating that buffer. So the person that I saw in the bed, with tied up with all these things, all the nurses coming every 4 hours, check my vitals, and the doctors doing the rounds. Who is that person? And who is like, my mental acuity was still there, my emotions were still alive, my psychological state was still intact. Who is that person? And so I created a little buffer, not detached, but a little buffer between that problem and the situation. And then I did something really radical. I used metacognition. Metacognition is the thinking of the thinking. So we were always told that intellect was the number one trait to have. Then we were told, no, emotional intelligence is, of course, emotional intelligence is very important. But really, the data and the research out right now is metacognition. It's the who's doing the thinking, what consciousness is running through the situation. And so I was forced to actually wrestle with these things. One of the major things that really helped me was two anchors, which was silence and stillness. And I don't care what belief system you believe in, it could be no belief system, but silence and stillness, I'm telling you, they're gold. Because
They are.
when you sink into it, you realize something very important. You realize that the illusion that this is all real, like my pain and my sorrow, my discomfort, this is real. This is not pretend,
Right.
but there's
Mhm.
much more to it. The illusion is thinking that this is all there is, and it's not.
Right.
There's something else. I can't validate that for anyone.
Right. I
No
know
one
what you
I
mean.
know knows, but it's something that you can only experience what you experience. And then I did use something like an adaptive resilience mindset, where instead of thinking of it as just bouncing back, I thought of it, well, how can I be adaptable in this moment? How can use the flexibility, create strategies from the discomfort that I was going through? And then I was doing things like self-regulation. I'm been a long time meditator. I've been meditating for over 20 years. This is before my cancers. But I tell people, no, it could be prayer, it could be journaling, it could
Right.
be walking in silence, it could be breath work, it could be humming. I don't care, whatever works for you. Use those things that are available to you. I'm not very prescriptive in what I do. I'm also not a doctor or therapist. I know my
Right.
lane. You know your lane. We know as coaches, we help guide people to find the
Yes.
answers for themselves. That's what a really great coach does. And so for me, I'm not prescriptive. I often tell people just two things: do whatever works for you, but two things: don't hurt yourself and don't hurt another person. That's the only
Yes.
Only guardrails that I want you to focus on. That's it.
That's boundaries. Boundaries intact. So tell us about the book you wrote.
Yeah. So that book came to be about 4 years ago. At this point, as a journalist, I've interviewed, gosh, over 2,000 leaders, change makers, even celebrities. I've interviewed Venus Williams, Ice-T, Deborah Messing, a whole bunch of people. And I also, with the book, interviewed 200 cancer survivors. And it was all walks of
Wow.
life, different cancers. And then I took 35 of their stories, told my own, and it was called I Survived Cancer. Here is How I Did It. 35 cancer survivors share their journey. And it became, thankfully, a bestseller. But the bestseller status wasn't the issue. It wasn't something I was vying for, really.
Right.
Yeah, of course, I wanted it, from an
Right.
ego level.
We all want it.
But but I was more touched that it reached that many people, that
That's
it
amazing.
created. And so, yeah, it's just in the book, it's a compilation of all the interviews I did with them. And one thing I told them is when you give me the submission, I had their interview, but I said, when you give me the submission, like the final draft approved, I want you to include your website, if you have one, your social media. They're like, really? You want me to promote myself in your book?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, you know why? And they're like, why? I said, because I want people to know that you're living, that you're thriving, that you're doing, that cancer wasn't the last sentence for your story, that cancer was not the death sentence for you, that people can look you up and see that you're doing, that you're being, that you're acting, that you're living. And they're like, oh, thank you so much. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So, of
Wow.
course, I have another book now percolating now since I've been through cancer twice. But I'm also testing the market, right? So in my keynotes, I test these topics and I see what resonates because I want the next book I want to write. It's not going to be only about cancer because that one was only about cancer. The next one's going to be something completely different, which I'm still germinating on what that is.
Oh my God, Savio, that is amazing. Tell people how they can reach you.
Sure, absolutely. They can find me on my website, saviopclemente.com, SAVIOPCLEMENTE.com. On there, I have my keynote work. I also have my book and then also my coaching information if they want it. But every Wednesday, I write a Substack newsletter called The Human Resolve. And in there, right now, I told you about the CEO and CMO interview series. But also, I talk about the head, heart, and gut, which is the three brains. And I go into how you can actually create less pressure in your life and create more non-pressure by actually figuring out things. And that can all be found on the website. And then if people want to reach me on social media, they can find me at every platform at The Human Resolve.
And I will put your information in the video. Sorry, my voice,
No
but
worries.
it's all good. If you can leave the audience with one piece of advice, what would it be?
I think I would echo what my initial thesis is that performance doesn't fail first, clarity does. And people often assume that they have to fix what's on the outside, but it's always about the inside. So you got to actually resource yourself, find the clarity, use some of these tools I mentioned. We didn't talk about my TEDx talk, but it was called 7 Minutes to Wellness, How to Love Your Inner Stranger. And in there, I have a framework, like a lens that I use called the Aloha Reboot. Aloha, as we all know, means hello. So just quickly, A stands for acknowledge, acknowledge where you are. L stands for listening, listen to your inner self and the voices that come through. O stands for opening yourself up to this information. H stands for harnessing, make the connection, see what works, what doesn't work. And A stands for acting. Have the courage to act because, as you know, with the stages of change, it's not that people don't want to change, they don't know how to change. So they don't know if they're thinking about change, pre contemplation, in change, wanting to relapse from change. And so you need courage in order to do that. 7 minutes every day. Or if you don't have 7 minutes, which someone once told me, then take one of those acronyms and practice it for a day for 1 minute. And it's called the Aloha Reboot because, as we all know, aloha in Hawaii means hello. So it's a hello to your inner self. The more clear you are, the more, as I believe, the more we catch and release, because I believe life is catching and releasing. If you have a pot and it's filled with water, if you don't empty the pot, nothing can fill it. No fresh waters can fill it. So you have to catch and release, and that's the way you do it.
Yeah, I will put all your links in there so they can definitely reach out. And to the audience, I know this conversation touched your heart. And if you know someone who is struggling, whether they struggling with a crisis, or cancer or anything related to a crisis, please reach out to Savio. He lived it, breathed it. Now he can help move you forward. And so don't forget to subscribe, follow. Always have amazing people, like I told you. But let's just thank Savio for joining us today. Thank you so much, Savio. Really appreciate you.
Thanks, Coach.
And to the audience, have a fantastic Monday.
It's your time to shine. Your journey to chart. Coach Rice wisdom will heal every heart. So join us now. Let's make life suffice. Welcome to Mondays with Coach Rice.